Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. Today, we're tackling something I know a lot of us have been through, at least if you're dipping your toes in the dating pool these days. We're talking about ghosting.
Hmm.
And, it's funny because we got a YouTube debate on this, and I was really struck by just how differently the two hosts see the whole thing.
Yeah, and it's not like this is a brand new thing, right? I mean, people have been avoiding other people probably since, well,
Oh,
forever.
absolutely. The whole I'll call you and then never calling is like classic. Check.
Exactly. But the way we talk about it now, this whole ghosting thing, it feels very, I don't know, 21st century.
And with dating apps and everything, it feels way more common.
Like the technology just amplified it.
Hmm.
But the psychology behind it, that's what I'm really interested in, especially with these two hosts and how they frame the power dynamics of it all.
Yeah, because one of them came in like guns blazing, basically said ghosting is ruining dating. Called it like emotional terrorism, even.
Yeah.
Pretty intense stuff.
Yeah. No, they definitely didn't hold back. But it speaks to this very human need for closure. Like when we actually care about someone, being completely ignored, it's jarring. Like it makes you question everything.
And it can really mess with your self-esteem, right? Like,
Yeah.
what's wrong with me that they couldn't even be bothered?
Exactly. And it makes it so much harder to just move on because you're stuck with all these unanswered questions swirling around.
Which is wild to me because the other host in this debate, totally chill about the whole thing, their take was basically, look, not every interaction needs this big dramatic conclusion. Sometimes people just drift apart.
Hmm.
And they even went so far as to say that, like, honesty, overrated.
See, that's where I think the power dynamic comes in.
Yeah.
It's like they see ghosting as this way to take back control,
Hmm.
especially in dating, where it can feel like you're always at the mercy of other people's feelings.
So it's like protect yourself first, avoid the drama, and just fade away.
Exactly, the sort of self-preservation thing. But it does make you wonder, are we just normalizing this, like, avoidance of any difficult conversation?
Right. Because we're all afraid of confrontation to some degree, but is that really how we should be approaching relationships, romantic or otherwise?
And this is where I think technology comes in too. Because with dating apps, it's so easy to just swipe to the next person. Like, why bother having a potentially awkward conversation when there are a million other profiles just a thumb scroll away?
It's like we're treating each other as disposable in a way.
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessarily good for any of us long term. Because even though it's online, these are still real people with real feelings.
Well, are we basically trading genuine connection for like convenience? And is that a trade-off we're okay with making?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Mm,
And to be honest, I don't think there's an easy answer. But just acknowledging that there's this tension, this clash between how we behave online
yeah.
and the very human needs we all have, that's a start.
And it's not like, just about finding a new date either. It's the emotional investment, even after just a few good conversations.
Right, like you start picturing where things could go.
Exactly. You get your hopes up. So to have that just cut off, no explanation.
It's brutal. And I think it can be especially tough for people who already struggle with self-doubt. Because then it's easy to fall into that trap of, see, I knew I wasn't good enough, or I should have done this differently.
Instead of putting the blame where it belongs, which is on the person who ghosted.
100%. It's about taking back your narrative. Because ghosting can really mess with your sense of self-worth, especially if you let it.
Which is interesting because one of the hosts we were talking about, they actually kind of touched on that. They said, sure, ghosting, it's not great, but it does give you a clear answer.
Let's see what they're saying.
Like, yeah, it's a harsh answer, but it's still an answer.
Yeah.
They basically said, look, if someone can't be bothered to even give you a simple not interested, then they're not worth your time and energy. Move on.
There's something very pragmatic about that, isn't there? Like rip off the Band-Aid, so to speak.
Right. Don't waste time chasing after someone who clearly doesn't respect you enough to even be honest.
I think there's a lot of power in reframing it that way. Because when you take back that control, instead of letting the ghosting define you, you can start to see it as like this weird, messed up opportunity for growth.
Okay, so instead of dwelling on it, letting it hurt your self-esteem, you're saying we should try to learn from it.
Exactly. It's like, okay, this happened, not ideal, but what can I take away from this? Were there any red flags I missed? Maybe I ignored some of my own needs trying to make it work. It's all valuable information for the future.
That's a really good point because I think sometimes we can get so caught up in the hurt and the rejection that we don't actually stop and think about what we learned from the whole experience.
It's so easy to get stuck in that cycle of blame and self-doubt. But the real growth comes from saying, okay, what just happened there? And how can I use this experience to make better choices moving forward?
So we're not necessarily saying that ghosting is always a sign of incompatibility, right?
Ah,
Are there ever times when someone might have a legitimate reason for, like, falling off the face of the earth?
right. We do have to acknowledge that life happens. Sometimes people go through personal emergencies, family stuff. Maybe they're dealing with mental health issues, and they just don't have the capacity to communicate effectively.
I get that, but even a simple message saying, hey, I need some space, or something like that, that would be so much better than radio silence, right?
Of course, ideally, yes. Open communication is always the goal. But we also have to remember that not everyone has the emotional tools to navigate those tough conversations.
So it's like they're more afraid of the confrontation than they are of hurting the other person by disappearing.
It's possible. And
Like,
look, we can't control how other people behave.
okay.
All we can control is our own reaction to it.
It's like you were saying earlier, taking back your narrative.
Exactly. Because someone else's bad behavior, whether it's ghosting or something else, it doesn't define your worth.
Yeah, you got it. It's their issue, not yours. Ultimately.
Exactly. And, it's a good reminder that we're all just out here trying to figure things out, right? Especially when it comes to dating.
Tell me about it. So much easier said than done, though, right? Like, intellectually, I get it, but it still stings when you get ghosted.
Oh, absolutely. It's like those feelings of rejection, they're totally normal. Don't beat yourself up for feeling them.
Yeah.
It's more about what do you do with those feelings?
Right. Like, do you let them take over, or do you
When-
try to learn from them?
Exactly. Because you can choose to see this whole ghosting thing as like this big, scary monster under the bed. Or you can try to see it as, okay, this is a thing that happens. It's not fun, but it might reveal something about the situation or even about myself.
And I think that's what's been so interesting about this whole deep dive, right? It's like we have these two very different perspectives on ghosting. And yeah, part of it is about communication and respect, but it's also about recognizing your own worth, knowing when to walk away from something that isn't serving you.
And maybe, just maybe, finding a way to have those tough conversations, even though they're uncomfortable. Because
Right.
honestly, I think a lot of us, we crave that realness, even if it's not always pretty.
No, I hear you. Like, we're so used to this instant gratification, swipe left, swipe right culture, but then we wonder why we're not finding any real connection. It's like, are we even sure how to connect anymore?
Right. And that's the bigger question, isn't it? Like, how do we navigate this new world of dating where technology is always there, making it both easier and harder to find what we're looking for?
Man, I wish I had all the answers, but this has been a good reminder that, like, we're all in this together, figuring it out as we go.
We are. And hey, the more we talk about it, the more we put these like uncomfortable truths out in the open, maybe we can start to shift the whole darn thing.
Yeah, totally. Maybe that's how we start to create a dating culture that's less about, avoiding each other and more about actually showing up for ourselves and for each other.
100%. Because at the end of the day, we all want that connection, right?
We do. So, to everyone listening, tell us, what's been your experience with ghosting? Have you been ghosted? Have you ever ghosted someone else? Let's keep this conversation going. And hey, no ghosting allowed here, okay? Hit us up on our socials. Let's unpack this together. And until next time, happy dating, everyone.
Take care, everyone.